right, well, I guess we should go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Tiara Curry. I'm a senior scientist in the Saving Life on Earth campaign at the Center for Biological Diversity, and I am joining this webinar from traditional Shawnee territory. Thank you so much for joining us for our speaker series webinar to learn more about the many ways that we're working to end extinction. We have a special program tonight that was organized by our Population and Sustainability Program about the links between family planning decisions and the environment. So first, we're going to have a conversation with our panelists, and then we'll open it up to your questions. We'll post a video of this webinar tomorrow, and then later it will have closed captions and Spanish translation added. And an exciting new thing tonight, if you want to follow along with this discussion on Twitter live, please use the hashtag to kid or not to kid live. And Linda, a fellow staff member at the center, is going to be live tweeting during the event tonight. So as part of our work to end the wildlife extinction crisis, we work to raise awareness around the need for voluntary rights-based family planning. We support every person's right to have children if and when they're ready. But even when people have access to contraception, the decision on whether or not to have children is anything but simple. And our three panelists today are experts on these topics, so I'm very excited for you to meet them. We have Maxine, the director of To Kid or Not to Kid, Kristie, a student activist at the University of Guyana in South America, who's joining us from there tonight. And she's also a young leader from the organization Women Deliver. And we have Kelley, a staff member here at the center in the Population and Sustainability team. So I'm going to hand it over to them to let them tell you a little about themselves.
Maxine, do you want to start us off?
Sure, yeah. I mean, most of you by now, I know a lot of people downloaded the film. Thank you so much for watching. And it's been amazing partnering with Center for Biological Diversity. So this is really exciting. And I'm the director. You've seen so much of me. I don't really feel like I have too much more to give you, except I've made documentaries for a long time for various different networks and outlets, from the BBC to Discovery to Sundance. And this has been a huge passion project for me, as you can well imagine. And I'm delighted to be able to ask you any questions, and do stay in touch after the screening as well, because we have a very, very active social media platform, and we love hearing from the audience. So if you don't get to any questions, do get in touch. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Kristie, Maxine. So go ahead, Kelley.
I'll let Kristie go and then I'll finish it up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kristie Duff. I was born and raised in the Cooperative Republic of Guyana here in South America. I'm currently pursuing my Bachelor of Science in Earth and Environmental Studies at the University of Guyana. And I spend my leisure time actively working with organizations that champion sexual and reproductive health rights, environmental and humanitarian efforts. I was the past president of the Eco-Just Society, which is the main environmental club of campus. And I also volunteer with several other organizations right here in Guyana, like the Guyana Responsible Parenthood Association, the University of Guyana's Robotics Club, and the International Decade for People of African Descent. I look forward to having a fruitful discussion with diverse opinions and perspectives, and I'm so excited to be here tonight. Thank you for having me, the Center of Biology.
All right. Well, I want to also thank everybody for being with us tonight, and Tiara for bringing us together for the discussion. And I'm excited to talk with my fellow panelists who have these same overlapping interests as me: reproductive rights, health and justice, along with environmental sustainability. So as Tiara said, my name's Kelley. My pronouns are she and her. I've been with the center for 2 years now, and most of my career was spent in recycling. But about 5 years ago, I saw that recycling alone was problematic. We instead needed to be decreasing production and consumption of stuff. So I started looking at a career change, and I became interested in working at the intersection of health and the environment. And I went back to school for a master's in public health. And I really had this personal interest in family planning. So while I was in school, I became a certified family planning counselor. So my role at the center allows me to really work at this intersection of family planning and waste prevention, which I'm pretty sure is fairly unique. I'm not sure if anybody else has that role. So I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion so much. And Maxine, as I rewatched the film this week, I was just amazed by all the different topics that you touched on in this movie, from the social pressure to have children, to the baby economy and various contraceptive methods, to really this overarching theme of bodily autonomy and reproductive choice. I just cannot wait for the discussion because I think we're going to have so much to talk about in what you packed into this movie. So I'm going to keep going on here a little bit. We thought before we'd start that we'd run a poll to learn a little bit more about who's on this webinar. So I think my colleague Naaman is going to put the poll up now. And I'm going to just kind of talk through this a little bit. So would you say, and you can pick multiple things here, that you are child-free by choice, meaning that you've consciously made the decision not to have children? Are you childless by circumstance? You may want children but can't have them for a variety of reasons. Are you one that has chosen parenthood by choice? That would be the person who, again, consciously made the decision to have children. Or are you maybe parenthood by circumstance? This would be a person who may love the children they have, but they were unplanned or mistimed, or maybe you're a step parent or guardian. Or maybe it's that you're undecided. This would be a person who hasn't yet decided if they want children. Or maybe you're other. You know, this is for somebody who doesn't fall into any of the other categories. So hopefully with that, that gave folks enough time to answer the poll. Naaman, let me know if you think we should show the results yet, or if we need to give people a little bit more time. All right. Well, I think, Maxine, we've got 56% of our attendees are child-free by choice. So I think we know who your audience is. But we've got childless by circumstance at 10%. Our next highest here is parenthood by choice at 20%. So, and those of you that are undecided, welcome. You know, hopefully this discussion will help shed some light on your experience of what you should do about parenthood. And believe me, I did a lot of soul searching on my end. So thank you, Naaman. I really appreciate that. We also wanted to do one more thing before we get into the questions. For those of you that didn't get to watch the documentary yet, or just need a little memory jog, we thought we'd take a couple minutes to show the trailer before we start the discussion. So I will turn it over to our tech experts for that also.
When are you going to have a baby? That, without doubt, is the question young married couples hear most. After all, isn't that what the American dream is all about?
I always put off my decision to have children.
Childless women can never be happy.
The childless choice is a sort of cancer in our culture.
We need to have higher birth rates in this country.
I've spent my life surrounded by children, but if I ever considered not having them...
Not having children, you could say that's selfish.
You and I not having a family, that's it.
It's really hard to talk about.
So I started asking the question, why can't we talk about not having children? Do you know anybody that's made the decision not to have children?
She started in pretty much right away, like, oh, you want sterilization, why do you not want kids?
I've been told you're not a complete woman until you become a mother.
The baby products industry is expected to hit $49 billion.
You are saying if you are giving life, you've done a better job than if you haven't.
Having kids is probably the best thing most people do because they have created life.
It's against all natural instincts when two people get married for them not to have children.
For me, and millions of men and women,
they hand her to me and I'm like, oh, she's beautiful, and oh my God, what did I just do?
It's one of the biggest questions
I would rather die on the operating table than have a baby
of our lives. So, we had sex last night. Do you think there might be a chance that...
I think there's a chance. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had trouble sleeping. I wouldn't be so nervous.
It's estimated that 40 to 50% of American pregnancies are unintended.
I don't know.
Wow, Maxine, your film is so powerful. So many thoughts. So let's just tell us why you decided to make this film. It's the very personal story of your family planning journey. Give us your motivation.
Sure. Gosh, I'll try and keep this as short as possible because this is always the big answer. Essentially, when I was trying to make this decision, and I kind of think I knew what the decision was, but I didn't feel society would allow me to make this decision, if that makes sense. And so I didn't see myself or my decision reflected back at all in anything I was watching. I'm a filmmaker, and there were no films out there. There were no TV shows. There were a few books, and thank God, literally, that there were. And so I kind of did what I do best and picked up my camera and actually started to make a really, really boring film. I have to be honest, like I was hiding behind my camera. I was interviewing that expert and interviewing that expert. And I came back and showed a few of my filmmaking colleagues, and they were like, "You're not being brave enough. You know what you got to do." And so I kind of had to make that decision to make it very personal, because to be honest, it was me making my decision. And I do come through this place of being able to own my decision and be loud and proud about it by the end, which feels pretty amazing. So I just felt like if there was nothing there for me, and knowing in the making of the film, in the 5 years of making the film, seeing like more articles being written about it, and there's so much more being written about it now, that I felt I was at this point in time where people needed it just like I did. And the audience have been amazing, coming back and saying, yes, that's exactly what they needed.
I was struck by just how vulnerable and transparent you are in the film. I think that's what gives it a lot of its power, is how brave you were.
Thank you.
Let's learn more about Kristie. Kristie, I'm so excited that you could join us tonight. You are officially our first panelist from South America. So I haven't heard of Women Deliver before. Tell us about your role. Tell us about the organization and your role in it.
So Women Deliver is the leading global advocate that champions gender equality and the health and rights of women and girls. In 2010, Women Deliver started their Young Leaders program. And over the past decade, over 700 youths from approximately 138 countries have been able to benefit from this program with regards to advancing gender equality in their countries, in their regions, and generally around the globe. So in 2020, I was one in 300 youths selected for the class of young leaders. And currently my role is to actively participate in workshops, programs, that will, in the end, develop my skills and connect me with people, resources, and platforms in order to build my individual capacity so that I can be able to use that knowledge back home here in Ghana, and hopefully one day in the world.
I have no doubt that you will. Kelley, you are a population and sustainability campaigner, and you have more letters after your name than almost anyone that I know. So tell us more about your role.
Sure. So our work at the center is grounded in the belief that every person should have the right to choose if and when they want to have children, and how many, and to do that in a safe and healthy environment. We work to ensure that every individual has the resources, access to contraception, and education to plan their reproductive futures. So my role at the center is to develop and execute projects like this that focus on rights-based solutions, from voluntary family planning to the solidarity economy, to address how the effects of population pressure and inequitable consumption impact our environment. You know, we really do understand that every child born in the United States has an outsized impact on the planet, and we work to address both topics through gender empowerment, along with individual and systematic changes in our consumer choices, extraction, and production. So we know that many environmental groups do not discuss population for a variety of reasons, and one of those is being immigration. However, we believe immigration policy does not address global population growth, unplanned pregnancies, or the pressure of destructive production and consumption practices. So we also understand that it's a really complex topic that shouldn't be simplified because communities have been and are being violated through reproductive oppression. We want to support reproductive rights and justice allies to form long-term holistic solutions that incorporate access to education, healthcare, healthy and safe environments, and gender equity for everyone. And in that vein, our team really is looking forward to working with our new environmental justice team that is going to help us, the center staff that works on these projects, to support allies doing work around, say, toxins and endocrine disruptors or the impact of extreme heat on birth outcomes, really confirming that our work is supporting not only wildlife, but people.
I'm glad you brought that up. We have a new environmental justice program and an energy justice program. So it's really exciting to be moving in that direction overtly. So people choose to be child-free for a variety of reasons, from physical to lifestyle to financial, but increasingly people are concerned about the environment. Maxine, you touch on this in your film, but what's your experience been like in how people talk about their environmental concerns related to family planning?
You know, it's really interesting. There are as many reasons to not have children as to have children. And actually, I think possibly more to not have children, because it's such a decision that we have to really sit down and decide and plan to not have children. And what's really been on my heart in making the film is there is an amazing statistic that I only found out in the process of making the film, that 45% of pregnancies in the US are unplanned, which is kind of crazy. And, you know, we're talking about, you know, Center for Biological Diversity, we're talking about the environment here, and that definitely was one of the reasons for me to flip that switch. It really made me realize that I don't need to leave the legacy of my kids on this planet. My legacy can be in other ways, or actually, as one author put it, how beautiful to not leave a mark on the earth behind you. And I'm like, I keep that sort of little mantra as like, wow, that's really amazing. And we really don't talk about not leaving a mark. Everybody always talks about legacy and how to make your mark on the earth. And when we think about environmentalism, it's kind of, how can we not leave a mark on the earth, really? So when we talk about the decision to not have kids for the environment, we could talk, the whole panel tonight, the whole webinar could be about that, because it's a really, really broad, long, the reasons for not having kids. There are many, 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 many reasons, and protecting the environment is one of them. I hope that answers your question.
I mean, every question brings up a million more questions, right? But we're trapped within the confines of an hour. It seems like climate change is on more and more people's minds in relationship to family planning. And there's an organization called Project Drawdown that discusses this. And then there was a letter signed in 2019 by more than 11,000 scientists that identified family planning as a climate solution. But this connection between family planning and climate can be a really controversial one. So I wanted to go over to Kristie to just ask about how family planning and other environmental issues, do people relate them in Guyana? And does your work like help people understand the interconnection?
Generally, I do not think that persons in Guyana relate the two concepts. Guyana is Ghana has a small population of approximately 750,000 persons, and majority of them are confined to the low-lying coastal strip. A majority of them live on the coastal strip. I remember a few years ago, I did a survey on climate change, and many persons were of the opinion that climate change is natural or that it's God's work. And so currently, now we're seeing a shift because, I mean, I guess after witnessing different experiences with sea level rise here in Guyana, coastal flooding, devastation of infrastructure, and crop loss, persons are now saying like, okay, maybe this climate change thing is real. So I say all of that to say that although persons are increasingly now believing in the issues of climate change or environmental issues, and although they do see the importance of family planning, I don't think that generally we've quite yet connected the dots between the two.
How do we help people make that connection?
I think what we're doing right now, panel discussions, more awareness sessions, webinars, workshops, I think social media platforms, we have so many things that we can use to give out information. And I think that would be the key to helping Guyanese connect the dots and persons generally around the world.
Thank you, Kristie. Kelley, every time we have a webinar, one of the questions is how can our members help? So I'm just going to throw that out there. How can our members help advocate for reproductive freedom here in the United States and globally?
Well, the good news is on the international front, one of President Biden's first actions in office was to rescind the global gag rule through executive order. So when this is in fact, this policy really cuts off funding to NGOs that provide abortion counseling or referrals. And there's a new permanent repeal of this political football, and it's in a bipartisan bill called the Global Health, Environment, and Rights Act. And this would really ensure that eligible NGOs can continue to operate US-supported health programs abroad, including counseling, referral, and legal abortion services with their own non-US funds. So the first thing that we would recommend is to urge your congressperson to support the reintroduction of this Global HER Act to permanently repeal the global gag rule. But domestically, as we've always said here, we have an outsized impact on the environment in the United States. So we really need the Biden administration to repair the damage that the Trump administration did to Title X. We've got 19 million people who are in need of publicly funded contraception, and 95% of them live in contraceptive deserts where they lack access to healthcare centers that offer the full range of contraceptive methods. So the Title X family planning program was created to bridge the gap in care between, by providing funding for reproductive health services for low-income people. So, but the Trump administration instated a gag rule to block funding for Title X clinics, similar to the global gag rule, so that those health clinics that provided, referred, or discussed abortion services had to leave. So that, a lot of our Planned Parenthood clinics left the Title X program. So thankfully, just a couple of weeks ago, the House Energy and Commerce Committee released its reconciliation package, and the proposal includes $50 million in supplemental funding to the Title X family planning program. And Biden is asking Health and Human Services to review the laws and the policies and the procedures that the Trump administration put in place so that we can roll back some of this work that was done by the former administration. But before I close out with that, because I do want to let you all know that there are a couple of other new domestic bills that we should be keeping an eye on. So first is the Women's Health Protection Act. So this protects the right to access abortion care by creating a safeguard against bans and medically unnecessary restrictions. We've seen more and more of these coming up. The other is the Black Maternal Health Momnibus Act. So the US has the highest maternal mortality rate in the developed world. And the crisis is most severe for Black moms who are dying at 3 to 4 times the rate of their white counterparts. So to address this crisis, this act would make critical investments in the social determinants of health that influence maternal health outcomes like housing, transportation, and nutrition. It would support moms with mental health conditions and substance abuse disorders, and invest in community-based initiatives to reduce the levels and exposure to climate change related risks for moms, babies, and much more. It's about a 12-point plan. But so those are kind of 4 things that we could all be supporting when they come up, and or right now the global gag rule. You can request that your congresspeople support the reintroduction of that.
Thanks, Kelley. It seems like the answer to how I can help is always like personal decisions and fight for good policies. So I want to go back over to Maxine. You share in the movie that you were ambivalent for years in whether or not to have children, and it can be really hard for people to choose not to have children or even to have those conversations. And I feel like your movie is a really important tool to open up that conversation for people. But what are some other things we can do to like increase the social acceptance of choosing not to have children?
You know, what I've come to realize in actually now having the film out there is to not be afraid to bring up the subject, because actually what has been delightful and seeing again this process of over now 7 years, having made the film and now taking the film around the world to show the film and being at Q&As and meeting people when we could before COVID hit, is that if you bring the subject up and not be as afraid as I was 7 years ago, you might be delighted by the responses you get. Because actually at Q&As, I've had parents come up to me and say, you know, A, I decided to have 1 child. B, it wasn't actually an easy journey for me. And as this poll has just shown, I'm always really impressed when parents admit to it being a birth by circumstance. And so, you know, Kristie's work, Kelley's work, getting access to contraception, supporting these bills going through, like the most important thing I think we can do is avoid unwanted children being born. And the pressure that was put on me from society and family and work colleagues, yes, parents, other people that see our decision as being okay. Also, if you can speak up and support us when we're trying to find that language, you will get the biggest, when we can hug each other again, you'll get the biggest hug from us, because it's wonderful when I have somebody in the room, you know, saying, oh my goodness, what a great decision, congratulations. Because we never hear congratulations on our decision. And it's amazing when somebody said congratulations to me, it kind of gave me chills. So there's a lot of kind of things that we can do just individually, which is really easy. Like if you are child-free, talk about it. And if you're a parent or somebody that's still working it out, bring it up. And let's just like make it this casual conversation in the same way that giving birth and deciding to have children is a casual conversation. And in a minute, I've got a question for Kristie as well that I would love to ask her. So when I'm allowed to, when you open it up to everyone, because this is a subject, you know, needless to say, I could talk about forever.
Just go ahead and ask her.
Well, I'm really intrigued because what I find is that a lot of the conversation about access to contraception, you know, in the global South is like getting access to contraception. And I think what many people tend to forget is actually we are the biggest consumers in the United States. You know, Europe isn't that far behind. And actually we're the ones that really should be using contraception. But why I want to ask Kristie is actually because you neighbor Brazil and Argentina and, you know, obviously very Catholic countries. And I know Guyana isn't necessarily, you know, doesn't have those same ramifications on access to contraception. What is the stigma in Guyana to access? Is it more actually getting to contraception and the delivery of contraception, or is it the stigma of taking contraception? I'm sorry, that was a really long question.
So I think you're asking what is contraceptive access like in Guyana, am I correct? Are you asking me about, okay, so in Guyana, in my opinion, I think contraceptive access is pretty good here in Guyana. So we have the Ministry of Health here who have contraceptives, a wide range of contraceptives that are offered free here in Guyana. So we have things like tablets, intrauterine devices, condoms, intradermal contraceptives, tubal ligation. These things are all free here in Guyana at a public health institute. There are also places like GRPA, which is the Guyana Responsible Parenthood Association. They offer these contraceptives at a lower cost. So they're not free, but they're at a cheap cost here in Guyana. And they also work on outreaches for remote areas. So for places that may not have health centers, they do outreaches. So they go into these countries, these areas, and share, distribute contraceptives. But they have done a great job of having persons know that they have the freedom to decide if, when, and how to reproduce. Awareness is a big thing here in Guyana, and they're currently looking to get into the school systems and to incorporate these concepts. So we have more informed youths coming up. But currently the focus is on awareness and access. And in my opinion, I think both the Ministry of Health and GRP are doing an excellent job here in Guyana in terms of access for contraceptives. That's so awesome to hear. That's so awesome to hear. Yeah. I feel like we could be learning a few things, you know, right? You need to sort out our healthcare system.
For sure. Kristie, I want to ask you another question too, because if you think you're the youngest person on this panel, and everything happening on the planet with the extinction crisis and the climate crisis can make it seem really unsure about whether or not to bring children into the world. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Like, as a young person, do you think it's okay to bring children into this world?
I do still think that it's okay to bring children into the world, because I feel like the generations before us, this generation and the generation after us, will continue to adapt to changes and circumstances. I remember when I first started reading about overpopulation, the concern was about land and not having enough land space for buildings and house lots without rapid deforestation. And now we have skyscrapers, which are higher and accommodate more persons. So I do still believe that it's okay for persons to still have children, because I think the generations will continue to adapt. I also believe that we're in the information era. So we have so much information on social media, in books, and it's so readily available that persons are expected to be more informed. And I feel like the more informed we are, the more we can make informed decisions with regards to how we treat the planet.
Thanks, Kristie. There's even resources out there now about how to talk to your children about climate change, and like making them feel like they have the power to stop it. And I'm all about that and the hope there. So it can be really hard to start a conversation about family planning, and not for you, Kelley, because you're like a professional, you do this all the time, but what advice would you give to people about how to just talk more openly about family planning?
Well, you know, you can't have Sarah or I on a webinar without talking about our Endangered Species Condoms program, which I will try to show here. Oh, it's so hard with my virtual background. But you know, we really started this Endangered Species Condoms program about 10 years ago to create fun icebreakers to encourage people to open up this conversation about how many kids they want with their family, friends, or partners. And I got to tell you, Maxine, I really enjoyed the part of the film where you highlighted the comedians that were all kind of using humor as a way to talk about, you know, what can be a really sensitive subject. And that's really what we try to do with these endangered species condoms, because they have these fun little puns on them. But in a more serious light, I recommend really telling your family about the things that you love and the future that you hope for. And usually they want you to be happy. And so it helps to lay the groundwork for what might be a difficult conversation. And there is a really great website that has some conversation starters. It's called beforeplay.org. And it's got some prompts that might help you if you're, you know, trying to talk to your healthcare provider or trying to talk to your, you know, partner about your family planning decisions. And I would say that, you know, if the conversation is still a little bit difficult, you know, try to find a trusted confidant, the clergy, a counselor, or, you know, a healthcare provider that can walk you through your family planning decisions. And as a family planning counselor, we're taught to help people make a reproductive life plan. And we ask clients things like, you know, how many children do you want to have in your lifetime? When do you want to have them? And how do you plan to prevent pregnancy until you're ready? And then using those responses, you build a reproductive life plan the same way you would build a financial plan or a college plan or, you know, anything like that. And I don't think that folks are not that methodical about it, but it's a pretty big decision when you think about it, that we should be having some, you know, thought about this and building these reproductive life plans. And then I would just say that, you know, our goal is with the program, because we are not healthcare providers, you know, we provide, you know, 1 million condoms or whatever a year. Sarah can correct me on that, but really they're conversation starters. And we want you to, you know, be comfortable talking about family planning, sex, and the systematic barriers to reproductive justice that hurt both people and the planet. So really that's my advice to folks. And Maxine said it, I think you just need to open up the conversation and be comfortable in the uncomfortableness of what may come of that.
Can I add some points to that as well? I think top of that question list also should be, if you think you want children, A, if you don't want children, B, and then proceed down those questions, because we're actually trying, we just did a panel with GPs in the UK and OBGYNs, as they're known here, gynecologists, about how we can actually treat people for their life expectancy when they don't want children. And we're trying to make changes on their doctor's reports, you know, and there might be a sticker that denotes that they're child-free, so they don't get asked again and again and again, do you want children, do you want children, do you want children? The other thing, and I love this question because the whole reason I made this film and made it with comedy moments and a live vasectomy scene is that people can say, oh my goodness, I've just seen this documentary, To Kid or Not to Kid, check it out, because that's an amazing icebreaker. So many people are watching documentaries now, and you know, you can get it on the website, it's available kind of Amazon, everywhere, iTunes. Just say you've seen this film, or you've read this book, or you watch this webinar. Like, it's amazing when you say, you know, or you email, or you're next on Zoom with somebody, oh my goodness, I just watched this, or oh my goodness. It's such a brilliant icebreaker. And I've used it, you know, previously on other issues that can be sensitive. You know, fertility issues can be super, super sensitive. So I really, and I'm a documentary maker, so of course I'm going to say this, but I find it really opens doors when you say, listen, I've just watched this film and there was this live vasectomy. I'm a guy and I only have, you know, I have two choices of what, you know, what to use. It's either the Center for Biological Diversity condoms, or it's a vasectomy. Why isn't there more options? And that can open such an amazing conversation. So try it and let us know how it goes. Like, get in touch on To Kid or Not to Kid and let us know how that conversation goes.
So even the center, we've created some contraceptive conversation videos, and we'll put the link in the chat to those. And then we'll also put a link in the chat to a lot of different contraceptive options that Kelley put together. Maxine, speaking about that vasectomy, like, your husband is your co-star in the movie, and the conversations that you two have, like, they just made the movie so much more riveting. And I just wondered, like, now that you think about these things all the time, how do we get men more interested in supporting reproductive health and rights and justice?
You know, we have this wonderful partner called the Male Contraceptive Initiative, and they are working really, really hard, because the truth of the matter is that the pharmaceutical companies think that the male contraceptive gel and pill have too many side effects. And we as women have been dealing with side effects from hormonal contraception for eons. And I think, you know, get in touch, like, if you're a guy and think, you know what, I'd really like to take a contraceptive pill, you know, get in touch with Bayer, get in touch with, like, put, you know, consumer pressure. It's amazing how much, like, I get in touch with companies all the time and say, why haven't you made a recycled dish yet? Because I would buy it and I'm not buying your product. So that's what I do. And I really believe if enough of us do it, then the contraceptive pill for men will be on the counter. And, you know, if you're really certain that you're child-free, have a vasectomy. I mean, most of you that've seen the film now, I think 1,300 of you downloaded the link of the film over this week from us working with Center for Biological Diversity, which is awesome. And so you know how easy vasectomies are. You know, I was saying just this weekend, what a brilliant Valentine's gift if you're in a heterosexual partner and you say to your child-free partner, I'm willing to do a vasectomy. I mean, wow.
Thanks, Maxine. I want to jump over to questions that people are typing into the chat, and let's just take the most controversial one and do it first. So how do we counter the message from patriarchal religions that women are basically baby makers, that abortion and contraception are evil, and that abortion and contraception should be illegal and or inaccessible? You guys are gonna have to arm wrestle for who gets to answer this one. I'm just kidding. Who, Kelley or Maxine or Kristie, who wants to?
I feel like, Maxine, religion was kind of like a through line in your movie. I would love to hear your feedback.
Oh gosh, I mean, where do you want to start when it comes to religion? You know, and Kristie, I don't know what it's like, because I know also where you are, there's a lot of Protestant faith as well, and my background is the Protestant faith. And I'm actually from the UK. The Protestant faith actually comes with still a relationship leaning to the left, and actually access to contraception and people's women's choice is a really strong part of how we can, you know, be a community of loving people. And, you know, I still have a faith, and I'm still, and I'm very, very, very pro-choice. So I don't think the two can't be connected. And I think I mean, I would love to get the film into churches. I would love to have conversations, you know, when churches can meet again and have these conversations. You know, we're getting this film into many places that I didn't think we'd get it to. And we need some of these leaders, church leaders, which they've started to do. You know, we saw, an amazing movement in the US with gay marriage. You know, why can't that also be a movement for ministers to say, you know, we understand that abortion and pro-choice and everything is part of the community decision as well. And actually, there is a statistic out there that the most people that have, most women that have abortions are actually religious. So work that one out. You know, it's like many of us have to make that decision. For some, it's not very hard. For some others, it's a really hard decision. But it's still part of contraception, you know, a family planning decision. And I'm sorry, I don't know whether I did a hash job of that answer, but it's a tough one.
It's definitely a complex one. I'm just going to go through this line of questions. So, and I remember hearing about zero population growth too. Someone was exposed to ZPG or zero population growth and chose to only have one child, but adopted 3, and just wants to get your comment on adoption as a means of having a family without adding impact to the planet.
I can take this one. And I will actually, if I can go back and mention the religion one, I think it's impressive right now that we have a new president that is Catholic, but is also very pro-choice. So it is a red letter day for us to be celebrating that. And I think it does show that cultural norms can shift. And somebody that prominent is helpful in the movement for that. And if you are Catholic, there's a wonderful group called Catholics for Choice that you should look at if you want to. You know, on adoption, we do get this question, and it is a complicated topic because, you know, not everybody can afford to adopt. And so there is some equity issues in relationship to that. It's the same kind of with in vitro. And I know Maxine, you do wonderful work on all of these different topics, not just child-free, but so that would be my one concern, is that it is not necessarily an option for everybody yet.
Yeah, thanks for, and I'm sure Kristie would have something to add as well, but we did a spin-off series that Kelley, I know you fell in love with, which is really exciting. We did a spin-off series for PBS, which is also available to view all around the world. It's called Should We Kid or Not? And actually it has, because my story, you know, I could have made this film, To Kid or Not to Kid, it could have been a 10-hour film. And actually a lot of people were saying, make it longer, make it longer. But I was like, how many people are going to sit through a 2.5, 3-hour film? So we did this spin-off series, which includes many other people's choices, from a gay couple actually having a surrogate mother with a young gay guy saying, I struggle with the surrogacy issue because I feel like it's paying somebody to give birth and the connotations that that brings with it. And we talk about adoption and in vitro, and it really takes the conversation even further. And they're really short films. They bring two people from opposing opinions together into a studio, and it's it was delightful to make because I really saw opinions change. And when we talk about how to change people's minds, stick somebody in a room with somebody else for like 2 hours and let them talk, and it's amazing what comes from that. And afterwards they didn't want to leave. We were kind of like having to push them out the door, but they'd made friends, and it was wonderful. But I hear what Kelley's saying about adoption. This comes up a lot, and actually I worked on a foster care series too. We need to remove, and again, this is similar in Europe too, why is it so expensive to adopt when so many people want to adopt? Why has that become a business as well? We could make a whole other film about that. And again, we could, talk a lot more about it. And Kristie, I don't know how you feel about that subject and whether that comes up a lot in Guyana.
Hi, yes, adoption is a conversation here in Guyana because, of course, it is extremely expensive also here. There's so many factors that come into play for adoption, but for some persons, it is an escape. Persons who cannot physically have children, or some persons who may not want to put their bodies through a pregnancy process. So it is interesting to look at adoption here in Guyana because there's so many factors that come into play when you think about adopting a child.
Thank you all. Maxine, that sounds like a great next project for you, adoption, because I know a lot of people who are trying to adopt, and it is really hard. Like, it sounds like a simple solution, just adopt, but I know 3 different families who are struggling to adopt. So someone asked how a concerned male specifically can bring up the subject of family planning and conversation. It seems like the burden falls on women a lot, or the decision, but do you have advice for men specifically about how to bring it up?
I think I mentioned about, why is there only 2 options for men? Like, why isn't there a pill? Why isn't there, I mean, I know I'm joking, and I know it's not always easy, but again, talk about the documentary, talk about this webinar. It's actually easier. I've now found, and I know I'm talking about this after I've made a 7-hour film and I've been immersed in this issue, but I was afraid, and I'm so pleased I'm not afraid anymore. And unfortunately, if we get somebody's back up, then move on to the next person, and that conversation ends, and there'll be somebody that will be willing to talk to you about it.
I mean, I recognize it's funny that it's interesting to ask this of 3 women on a panel, but I understand it is hard as a man to talk about family planning for women, because as Maxine said, it does generally fall to the woman. But I really like her idea of flipping it and being like, how can I be supportive in other methods that are useful for men, and the research and development to get us there? But I think the bigger picture for me of how men can support this work is in women's empowerment. It is not just contraception. You know, we need income and income equality. We need support for, you know, child rearing. There's just still so many things that fall to women that make it difficult for a man to understand and talk about it, I think, in a sensitive way, because there's just some real systematic issues up here that we would love male allies to come to the table and help us figure out how to do that. And I know Sarah, my colleague, is in the back helping with tech, and we've talked about that. You know, what does that look like? What does a male ally look like, and how can we support them to support us? Just the same way as a, you know, cisgender white woman with privilege, how can I be an appropriate ally to my BIPOC community to support them in reproductive justice? I think you need to take the advice and leadership from the women in your life on how to do that.
Yeah, to bounce off you, Kelley, like if you are a heterosexual male and you're in a relationship and maybe say, you know, want me to like look into some other options, you know, if you're having a really bad day because you're having to, you know, your period is like crazy painful and you're like, oh my goodness, I want this period to stop. Like, you know, there again, like there are a couple of options and there should be more, and we need to pressurize people into making more. And there are child-free men out there that don't want children too. So again, there are communities, you know, as I show in the film, there are actually amazing communities. And the wonderful thing about the access that we have to people now is that there's meetups and there's Facebook groups and there's Reddits, and there's like, you will find your people, and that will encourage you as well. Like if you need that encouragement, which is why I made this film, to encourage me, and I found those groups to encourage me as well, because this just didn't happen from making a film. It happened because I found the support I needed.
Just to add, I think here in Guyana too, contraceptives and family planning and things of those natures are seen as women's issues. And I felt like the best part of the film for me was, Maxine, to see your husband go and get a vasectomy. I felt like he took that burden off of you, and it was so refreshing to see. And that's why I think your documentary is so important. So hopefully a male might see that and say, okay, maybe I could do this for my wife or for my girlfriend or for whoever it is that they're in an intimate partner relationship with.
Yeah, and you know what, Kristie, what's really awesome is men have already got in touch and said, because of seeing the film, that they went and got the vasectomy. And I'm like, that's it, my job's done.
Amazing.
Kristie, there's a question for you specifically, working in another country, about how voices from the United States or advice or messages from here, are they accepted there? Or is it like you do your own? Do you want to just talk about doing the work you do there?
I definitely think the United States is, you know, it's a big country. There are voices that are accepted here, but, you know, there are persons who think that, okay, maybe America and countries like China, they contribute to a large amount of the environmental issues, while small countries like Guyana here, you know, we're the persons who are left vulnerable because we may not have the resources to properly adapt or to help our people as much as they would. So it's like these big countries create the issues, and then we have to face the circumstances. So I do think some of the voices are heard and accepted here in Guyana, but there are differing perspectives here. So there are persons who are yay, and then some are nay.
Thanks, Kristie. Someone asked about pronatalism, or like the push to have children. It's so ingrained that people don't ever really ask themselves whether or not they really want to have kids, or if they would make good parents. And the question is just, please comment on that, on how ingrained pronatalism is.
I mean, again, it's like
your whole film is a comment on that.
It is. It really, really is. And I'm actually thinking, and thank you for bringing it up, because I'm actually thinking of taking that whole graphic and just making it a piece that can exist on YouTube and people can just throw it around and share it, and just like, because until we break down the pressures of society and, you know, taxes that can benefit, you know, for having families, and the pressures, the religious pressures. I mean, we're going back to religion, but the leaders in society and you know, historically that's been men. So it's amazing that we are making these moves as women, and able to break some of these conversations and have new conversations, because things are changing, and women are becoming, you know, are in leadership positions, and those voices can change, which is really, really exciting. And I think also, you know, one thing, and I can say it now because it's very hard to talk about your film and say you love anything about your film, but the one thing I do love is actually showing what the pressure made me do. And the pressure made me not have a conversation with my partner until I was married. Like, he could have turned around and said, no way, this is over. I wanted 5 kids with you and you don't want them, we're done. And that could have been really tragic. So learn by my mistakes. Do not have a conversation after you've got married because you were in so much fear to have that conversation. And this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to break the patriarchy. We're trying to break pronatalism and make change. And, you know, I love the Center for Biological Diversity inviting me and Kristie to talk about this film and show this film, because it also shows what a great forward-leaning environmental organization they are, and they're really putting their to use if I could find a better phrase, but to put their money where their mouth is. Essentially, it's like, let's talk about this, and we are, and it's awesome. And thank you for all your questions, because they're great.
There's a very specific question about your film. Did the young woman who is trying to get a tubal ligation, did she ever get approval from the medical system?
Not yet. And we did a very, very sad follow-up. And you can still watch it. It's on YouTube and it's on our Facebook page. We very recently, actually, we had an interview with her. And in this last year, she had to go through an abortion because she's now 5 years into wanting a tubal ligation and still not accepted for surgery, and she got accidentally pregnant. She was using contraception. We know, no contraception is 100%. I mean, please use it. Don't use that as a quote to not use contraception. But she got, unfortunately, she got pregnant, and to use her words, that was a very upsetting situation she had to go through, because she'd been fighting so hard and trying to persuade doctors to take her seriously. And that's why I've actually centered at the moment on UK doctors, because of Megan's story being in the UK, but we'd love to expand this conversation further. And if we have any gynecologists or anybody working in the healthcare field that wants to come on board and write to, we're actually writing to the Royal Society of Obstetricians in the UK at the moment to try and make change, and we'd love to make similar change here and, as many countries as possible.
Thanks, Maxine. These conversations go by so fast, and this is certainly one that we could talk about for a really long time. If we didn't get to your question, I'm really sorry. Maxine has told us that she'll gladly answer any of your questions over her social media channels. If you're on Facebook, that's facebook.com to kid or not to kid. She's also on Instagram and the website too, right? You can access those just from tokidornottokid.com.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, this has been an excellent discussion, and thank you guys so much for joining us. To everybody at home, and to Naaman, Sarah, Griselda, and Sarah, who are behind the scenes making this happen. If you missed the opportunity to watch To Kid or Not to Kid this week, you can rent it or purchase it at Maxine's website, tokidornottokid.com. We'll add that site to the chat right now, so you can just click on it. The video of this webinar will post tomorrow on the center's events page. Go to biologicaldiversity.org and then click on action and then click on events. There's a link there that will take you to the videos of all of the previous Saving Life on Earth webinars. For those of you who want to know how you can take action, you can contact your representative to support the Global HER Act that Kelley mentioned. Check your email later this spring. Kelley's organized another film screening it's called Our Gorongosa. It's about work in Mozambique to mitigate human-elephant conflict and to build programs that empower girls. When we close the webinar, a survey is going to pop up on your screen. Please take a minute to complete that because we really appreciate hearing your thoughts. And as always, we're so grateful for your support in this work to end extinction and save life on Earth because we couldn't do it without you. And I really appreciate your time this evening. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kelley and Maxine and Kristie.
Thank you all. Stay in touch.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.